I would like to welcome Martin Štofa, who is the lead designer on a game called Medieval, uh, which is not yet finished or launched, but I believe it will be launched pretty soon, hopefully. And it is a very interesting example of cooperation between Czech filmmakers and Slovak game developers, because this is an accompanying game to a fairly well-known big historical movie called Žižka. And now Martin will tell us a bit more about how they are developing it and what they are working on. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Let's go into it. I'm Martin Štofa. I work at Sepronia as a lead designer. And today I'm here to talk about some of the general ideas and directions behind the design of our new project called Medieval the Game. And let's get into it. So, Medieval the Game, if you're talking about the genre, it's an action-adventure video game played from the third-person perspective with some simple RPG elements. In the game, you take control of Jan Žižka, who was one of the most famous generals in the history and the most famous general in Czechia history. In this game, however, you will be playing as younger Žižka. During his days as he was still a mercenary, along with his small group of vagrants. So before he became the famous general. Also, just a note, we are trying to get this game out on the consoles of the new generation, so PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and all its derivatives, and also PC, of course. But we're also trying to get it out on the older consoles, which we are not completely sure it will be possible. So, well, how it began? It began with a movie that's had been in production for well over almost a decade. And during that time, probably around 2018, 2019, the director, Peter Jakel, decided that maybe it would be a good idea to have a video game that would accompany the movie. And there were a lot of discussions with different companies. However, we were the one who offered ourselves to make this game. And well, around the year 2019 and 2020, we began actively developing it. And how it works, well, within the context of our cooperation with the Czech side, there is a constant communication between our team and the team at Czech Productions company. We are always in talks with the director, Peter Jakel, and his team about how to insert some of their ideas, but also combine it with our ideas as well. So there is some level of cooperation and some sort of soft supervision, which gives us quite a lot of freedom during development. But, well, as it is, I'm sure you all are aware that sometimes soft supervision is a good thing, but also a bad thing, because we are sometimes on our own to develop some of the ideas. Let's go about the design rules during the development. Well, I came up with, I call it the 4 eyes rules. Well, as you can see, I'm also wearing glasses, so 4 eyes is quite good for me. Well, the rules are follows. So the idea, information, implementation, and impediments. It's quite an oversimplification, but I think the rules speak for itself. The idea is basically a basic building block on which you build a game. I would say that let's talk about a metaphor, a small metaphor, if you bear with me. So let's say you're building a house. The smallest thing you need when you're building a house is a brick, a lot of bricks. Same as when you're developing a game, you need not just one, you need several good ideas. But during development of the game, there are several different approaches as how you can place these ideas and transform them to something concrete. There are pencil and paper, which is the old school type. You have a whiteboard, and you have a digital approach. And we, in our company, we are using all three combinations. So when we are designing a location, for example, I myself am quite an old school guy, so I use a pencil and paper, and I design the level on a piece of paper, basically, which it serves as some sort of a blueprint. And then whiteboard is better for when you're trying to brainstorm ideas with your other colleagues, and digital is basically a mix. Information. Information, when I'm using the metaphor, it's basically like adhesive that holds together the bricks when building a house. Same as during the development of a game, informations are important thing that holds all these ideas together. And well, basically, when you're developing a game, you need to gather a lot of relevant data. During the development of Medieval, we needed to find a lot of historical documents. We needed a lot of images and photographs from the shooting of the movie. And also, when, for example, designing some of the locations, you need a lot of, well, basically concept arts, I would say, but we don't really use them. So then you need to analyze a lot of relevant sources. For example, what is entertaining for players? What type of combat do they want? What sort of design they want to see in certain locations, and also what type of artificial intelligence should the other non-playable characters have, so so that the game is fun, which is basically what I think every game should be: fun. Implementation. So, back to the metaphor with building a house. Implementation is it's a plan on how to place all these bricks using the adhesive to build an actual house and not to build, I don't know, some sort of caricature of the house. So, same as during the development of the game, you need to combine these ideas along with information you already received to create some sort of cohesive program that would result in an entertaining and interesting game. Well, for implementing, we use Unity in its version 2020. It's a game engine, as probably you all know. And we are using the HDRP, which is high definition rendering pipeline, which is something that allows us to create visuals that are enough for the new generation of consoles and for PC. So its visuals are, next generation. And also, of course, it has a lot of processing power, so we can use that to, create good artificial intelligence and entertaining combat system. When I have that other versions are a possibility, it means that for for the version of the game on older consoles, there is a possibility of using other types of other versions of Unity, because high definition rendering pipeline is pretty expensive in terms of processing power. So older consoles don't have that. Impediments. Last, return to the metaphor. When you're building a house, you can come across certain limitations, certain impediments. For example, you're building a house and you don't suddenly don't have enough money. It's same during the development of a game. Sometimes there's you have to keep an eye on the budget. Sometimes you can go over the budget, but sometimes you have too much money. Doesn't happen very often. You have also deadlines that you need to meet, and other resources are basically human resources. So you need to create a lot of 3D assets, but you don't have enough 3D modelers. You don't have enough programmers, and so on, so on. So you need to find the balance between what you have and what you can do. Limitations of software and hardware are pretty self-explanatory, because you cannot go over the processing powers of the platforms you are actively developing on. And the pitfalls of being an idea person, it's not enough that many people have good ideas, but not all of these ideas can be transformed into a good game. So you need to combine these good ideas with other aspects of developing a game. Let's go over some of the design choices we made. First, let's mention locations. The idea behind the locations within the game, some of them are pretty set on stone, because, our game is based on a movie, so we have to follow some of the rules and some of the locations that are already mentioned in the movie. But having said that, we have different types of landscapes. We have we have forests, we have villages, we have churches, we have dungeons, but also quarry, for example, just to mention a few. And when designing locations, the idea is that you want to build a good atmosphere, good ambience. So to do that, you cannot simply, put some objects here, put some objects there. You need to creatively think about placing these objects, and also you want to tell a story without actually telling a story during quests or dialogues. That's why it's a good idea to create some sort of story using environmental storytelling, which is something we are actively trying to do. And as I mentioned, the blueprint of the locations are done via pencil and paper. When you're creating locations, designing locations, you need a lot of information. For example, photographs, clips from the movie shooting, satellite images of Czechia forest, as well, most of the movie, and so most of our game takes place in the forests of the Czech Republic. We also need a lot of historical documents and paintings from relevant period of time. The story takes place. Sorry, the story takes place in the early 1500s, as the title says, medieval. And so, to correctly represent the era of the medieval, you simply need to have some historical documents, and you need to actively work with some sort of historian, to not deviate from that period of time. And also, to create and design a good location, you need to analyze your intended gameplay. For example, simply a combat system. You cannot design a location without thinking about the combat system you have in the game. So, for example, if the combat system actively employs a lot of free space, you cannot design the locations as tight corridors, because it wouldn't simply work. And also, good idea when designing locations is to place some story-related events. So, how would I put it? Let's say you have a main story idea, main storyline. What quests you want the player to play within a certain location. But some quests can come up, during creative brainstorming, and you need to keep an open back door within the location, so you can place all these new quests. About implementation of the location design, we are using automatic terrain generation plus simple manual touch. We also use a system called Vegetation Studio to generate lots of vegetation, which is mainly employed when designing locations with lots of vegetation, such as forest. But there are certain limitations to the system. So in some of the locations, we use manual placement. Also, we import a lot of in-house 3D assets. So, for example, I don't know, some buildings, historical buildings, you cannot simply get such 3D assets from anywhere else. And we use custom shaders, which are, if you don't know, basically a system of how to show some materials on the 3D objects. We also use real-time light, but also baked global illumination, baked reflection probes, volume overrides, VFX graphs, shadow proxies, volumetric, and so on, to create a good visual aspect of the game. And just to give you a small idea, when designing locations, some of the first drafts will be a lot different compared to the later drafts. For example, when I have the first draft of a certain location, and then how does this location look right now, which is basically an alpha version, for example. So, as you can see, it's pretty different, but the general idea, general layout is pretty much the same. The impediments when designing locations, there's few. For example, too many assets. When working with certain engines, for example, as I said, we are working in the Unity engine, there can come a time when you have too many assets on the scene. And that quite a lot slows the loading times, frame rate, input delays, everything else. So too many assets is well, you can fall into this pitfall. You want to have these some sort of location. You want it to have a lot of details, but sometimes it's not possible because maybe this location will contain a lot of characters, and characters using AIs take a lot of processing power, and you don't have enough then for the visual element. Software limitations are also a thing, as I mentioned when talking about the vegetation. And the most important thing is balance of the visuals against the performance. We are trying to get to the point where our game is playable on 1440p resolution and at 30 frames per second to create a sort of cinematic feel. Now let's talk about the artificial intelligence. The idea behind artificial intelligence within our game was divided into 3 groups of different types of characters, basically by interactivity, by which type of interactions these characters have with the player character. The first group is NY NPCs, so no interaction NPC. I'll talk about no interaction as follows. Well, no interaction NPCs are basically background characters. Imagine a large city. It's quite not feasible to have a lot of characters with which you can interact, I would say, that much meaningfully. So these types of characters are lacking a lot of interactions. They are here for basically to create an ambience. Basic interaction NPCs, these NPCs are used for basic interactions. For example, merchant, or I don't know, quest important character, and so on. And then we have the extended interaction NPCs. These types of characters actively employ also a combat system, so enemies. When creating artificial intelligence, the information you need basically stemmed into one group of information, and we basically analyzed some of the other games from the same similar genre, to some create a value graph of entertainment value. For example, we took the Plague Tale or The Witcher for the no interaction NPCs and the basic interaction NPCs, because both of these games have one thing in common, which are large cities or large villages, where you have a lot of characters that are, as I said, serving as some sort of ambience or background. And then we have the extended interaction NPC, which we were inspired by Fear or Halo series. In case of fear, it was the state machine type of artificial intelligence, and in Hello series it was the behavior tree. Implementation of the artificial intelligence for no interaction NPCs. We use simple animators and collision. So, when you're in the village or when you're in the city, you see all these characters and you can bump into them and you can see them, working on some stuff. I don't know, some, merchants are actively trying to sell their stuff. There are groups of people talking between each other and so on. Then we have the interaction prompts for most of the basic interaction characters. These serve as an element by which you can see which characters you can interact with. So these are mostly quest-related characters. And as I mentioned, the state machine and behavior tree are mostly used for the extended interaction NPCs. These are used to create an illusion of a character that has some sort of logic and interaction that you can, see with real people. Impediments when creating artificial intelligence or designing them is basically a contest between complexity and entertainment. Entertainment value basically boils down to, how many characters you need to create an illusion of an entertaining location, for example. And complexity is, basically about the hardware limitations of the platform you are developing on. And also you have time constraints. You can create, you can create an artificial intelligence of the characters that are pretty intelligent, but to do so, you would need a lot of time. Designing an artificial intelligence is a time-consuming task. So you have to find a balance between all your resources and some sort of feasible implementation. Now, let's talk about the combat system. The idea behind combat system was, at the beginning, it was a simple hack and slash. When we started developing the game, we were thinking about a small, simple adaptation of the movie. So, it should have been something small, but as the time went on, we decided that maybe it would be a good idea to have some sort of cinematic feel to it. So it wouldn't be such a simple adaptation. And then we added also some simple RPG elements. I probably shouldn't talk much about which RPG elements, but I would say we analyzed a lot of Souls-like games. So that should give you an idea. But also AAA titles like God of War or Last of Us. And then we have the combo system, which was designed with the intention of player having some sort of good feel about the combat. So it wouldn't be simple hacking, simple slashing, simple fighting. So we have a small system developed that actively forces the player to create combos, to defeat the enemies. When designing the combat system, the most important thing for us was to create something entertaining and something that the players would have fun playing. So we looked at the players' favorites, which were Rise of Rome, God of War, Last of Us, Dark Souls, Ghost of Tsushima, and so on. And we wanted players to have similar feel as these types of games. About implementation, we used iterative approach. So, as I mentioned, at first we wanted to create a simple hack and slash, but that was the first iteration of the combat system. But as the time went on, we added some small subsystems, and then developed those into bigger pieces of the combat system. For example, we adopted a token system from many similar games of the genre. For example, when analyzing a lot of games, like God of War or Ghost of Tsushima, it was easy to to spot this type of implementation, where when player fights against the group of enemies, only one or two of the enemies attack at the same time, so they receive some sort of token, which then goes around in the group of the enemies, and you can fight them one-on-one or one against two, instead of 1 against 5, which is impossible. And also we created takedowns and finishers. These were the small spice that actively created a better feel for the combat system. For example, when you're trying to be stealthy within a cave, which is a thing in the game, you may come across patrolling enemies, and you want to, surprise them from the behind. So you take them down with a quiet takedown, and then during the game, and during the active combat, there is a small system which employs the mentioned finishers. So sometimes when your attack is too heavy for the enemy to absorb, it enters a state when you can use a finisher to finish him off. The main impediments when designing combat system were mainly animation resources. We, as a Cypronia, we are a small indie studio, so animations were a resource that we were missing quite a lot. So we were forced to come up with some clever ideas on how to get over it. There were also CPU limitations. As I said, when talking about artificial intelligence, CPU limitations are quite important when dealing with combat system as well, because combat system is part of the characters which are of the group extended interaction. And also fairness. I think fairness is one of the most important aspects of the combat system, because you can have the most perfect enemy, the enemy that can anticipate all your moves, like in chess. Let's take chess. In chess, you have AIs you simply cannot defeat, well, aside from the grandmasters. And in action-adventure games, you also can create basically an unbeatable enemy, but that's not fun. You should have fun when playing games. And for the last thing, I will mention the playable character. As I said, the main character of the game, the character you are playing as, is Jan Žižka. And since our game is based on a movie, so it's a movie adaptation, the visual aspect of the character was given but it was basically set in stone as In the movie, Jan Žižka is played by Hollywood actor Ben Foster. But as is the immersion, freedom, inclusion, and fun, those are the most important aspects when playing as some sort of character. And if we used the visuals of the actor, we thought it would take all of these away. So, when you're playing as a character in a game, you need to be immersed to have fun. And you need a freedom to choose the character you want to play as. So, you know, let's say you want to have, I don't know, long hair, you want to have long beard, you want to be white, you want to be black, you want to be, I don't know, you want to have fun and you want to play as a Shrek, so you want to be green. So we created a customizable character. You can customize him with, well, pretty much everything. You can customize ears, you can customize his eyes, his hair, well, anything many different games of the same genre have. And also, it's a good marketing strategy. When you go on the YouTube and you type Elden Ring, for example, you see all these creations players created using the game character creator. And because of it, the game is pretty well known in all corners of the globe. So we decided to create a character creator as well. And if you want to have a look, you can go outside the door, turn right, and there is our booth, and you can try your hand on the character creator yourself. And also, if you want to see the game in the action, you can also take a look. There is a playable gameplay there. And that's all. Thank you for attention, and that's all. If you have any questions, you can ask, and if not, thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, so if you have any questions, ideally please use our Slido channel. This is the code that you can use within your browser to ask questions to Martin. And while we wait for some questions, maybe I will have some for you. Obviously, you have like a very strong NDA that you still have, so there is not a lot of stuff that we can talk about because this is a public stream, and we also have a recording of that. But maybe you can talk about like how much time is it still needed to finish development, or when can we expect the game to be published, or
right? I didn't mention the release date. Yeah. Right now, we're currently entering the alpha phase. We are pretty close to completing the alpha, and we are hoping that the game will come out sometime during the next year. Mm-hmm. It would be best if we manage to do it before summer. If not, probably early September, early October. But before the summer, it's basically our first plan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the movie had a premiere like a month ago, maybe?
Yeah, September 9th, I think. Mm-hmm.
So how will that tie into the whole ecosystem of the movie that's being built around the movie? I know that there should be some other media published too, like a comic strip or something, I don't know.
Yes. Along with the movie and along with the game, there is a book, quite thick book, which talks about the shooting of the movie, all the important details you might have missed while watching the movie. There's also a section about us, and throughout the entire book, there are small, I would say, marks You can scan using your phone, and using the application that comes along with the book. You can scan those marks, and you will see. Basically, it's an augmented reality 3D models of of the main character's weapon, some of the parts of the locations, some of the buildings used both in the movie and in the game.
Okay, is there any creative input coming from the director of the movie?
The director of the movie mostly stays as a consultant. He gives us a lot of creative freedom. But there are talks with the with the screenwriter Kevin Bernhardt. We're actively talking, communicating with him to create better dialogues so they would fit within the context of the movie. And also, since our game is not a simple adaptation, it's an expanded look on the movie story. We also needed additional help from one of the guys behind the writers team on the Czech production company.
Maybe last question, if there... Oh, there is a question actually on Slido. I have to come closer because I don't have my glasses. The Last of Us and Souls games are two completely different games. How do you ensure the game won't be a mashing pot of different ideas not working together?
Yes. Well, we are well aware that The Last of Us and Souls games are different. I would say that Souls games are more like a painting we are looking at when creating the combat system, and Last of Us is something we look at when we are trying to give the game a cinematic feel, because Last of Us is famous for its cinemacity.
So there is no gameplay conflict there. You're basically taking inspiration in different fields of the...
Yes.
Yeah. All right. What sense does it make to have a customizable character when you are playing for specific history character?
Easy. That's easy to answer, because yes, easy to answer, very easy. If you look up on the internet the image of Jan Žižka, you won't find any photograph, you won't find any definitive painting of him. You only find the imagination of the painters during that time. So Jan Žižka doesn't have a definitive image. And you can create, that's why you can create your own version of Jan Žižka. And the actor Ben Foster, we are not looking at him because, it would be, well, that's a different type of question.
So, yeah, that's actually a very interesting thing to think about. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Also, if you don't feel like writing into Slido, you can just raise your hand and I'll hand you the microphone and you can ask.
So video games based on movies are not so common these days, but they were quite common a few years ago. Most of them were very bad.
Yes.
To be polite.
Yes.
What do you think was the reason for that, and how do you approach this one to make it better? Thanks.
Good question. I would say those games, as you said, were bad, mostly because they were basically I'd say, spot-on adaptation, and they didn't stand as their own game. So I would say they were a product product of marketing of the movie. And, well, this might sound corny, but I would say those games didn't have their soul, which is, for me, the very important aspect of a game, that it needs to have a soul. And well, we're talking about our game. We are looking at the movie as, like a presentation of, changing images of locations, of characters. It's just something, it's like a background in our minds, but we're designing and creating our game. It's our own game. It just has some aspects from the movie. It's not, like I said, it's not a direct adaptation. It's an extended look on the aspects of the movie. So it stands on its own two legs.
Awesome. So Ciperonia has a fairly long history, actually. It's, I think, after Cauldron, is the second longest second longest active studio in Slovakia.
Yes.
It had its ups and downs. Currently, because of this project, you scaled the studio, made it a bit bigger. I think there are around 15 or so developers right now, right?
Yes, if we're counting all the, freelancers and,
right.
our
So my last question is: Are you also looking a bit more into the future? After you finish this project, are there any plans to sustain the size of the studio and maybe work on something of similar size and quality? Or are you focusing 100% on Medieval right now?
Well, that's a difficult question, as I'm not at liberty to say much about it. But yeah, as you said, we are mostly focusing on this project. But we are also keeping a small look to the side. Because there are some projects we would like to create. Maybe, revisit some of our old games. But that's not a definitive yes or anything. But yeah, we are currently focusing on our own work. And maybe if this ends well, we may expand both our theme and both our, creative endeavor in the future.
All right. So thank you very much, Martin. I'm crossing my fingers for you. We're looking very much forward to the release. And once again, there were no pictures, basically, like 2 pictures in this presentation,
yes.
But you can basically see how the game looks and plays right behind the doors. So don't hesitate to check it out. I think it's very interesting, and it's something that's not that many developers are working on in Slovakia. So definitely go check it out.
Also, we have a medieval knight at our booth. It's worth a look.
He has armor. Yeah. All right. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.